We all need encouragement from other Christians as we persevere in the Christian life. In Hebrews 12, a large part of the motivation for us to run the race with patience comes from the cloud of witnesses that have run the same race before us. In this series, Jason Dennis surveys the lives of 4 important missionaries of the past, highlighting their faith and calling us to act with the same courage in our generation. Join us for another episode in a series entitled Champions of Conviction.
Good morning, and welcome to Walk Talks. This is Jason Dennis, and as we continue our series this week looking at a few missionaries, today we'll be looking at Jim Elliot and his passion for the cause of Christ to the point of his death for the Auca Indians of Ecuador. He would have had no way of knowing that death was around the corner when he chose to minister to the Auca Indians, but he knew that there was a distinct possibility because these people were known to be violent and dangerous with outsiders. Prior to his going to the mission field, some people, including his parents, thought it might be better for him to be a youth minister in the United States, but he thought that international missions should take precedence. Jim Elliot showed his passion for Christ's work by choosing missions work over the easier or safer options. He even said, "He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose." This is a well-known quote, but when you think about it, it really makes one stop and think. Our lives, though often considered something that we should protect and use carefully, are actually something that we cannot keep. Our lives are in God's hands. Since we are not in control of our own destiny anyways, we, as Elliot puts it, would be fools to not give our lives back to the Lord. When we give our lives back to God to be used for what He has for us, we are, as Elliot puts it, gaining what we cannot lose. Our verses for today tie in very well with this thought. Today, we are going to be looking at Romans 12, 1 and 2. It reads, "I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that ye present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God." Here, Paul is telling us to present our bodies as a living sacrifice to God. He says that he beseeches us. In other words, he is imploring or fervently entreating us. He desperately wants us to do this, and as he concludes the verse, he says that it is a reasonable service. Reasonable here means that it is the only right thing to do. We may want to live our own lives or do what pleases us, but we need to, as the verse says, present our bodies to God so that God can use us as He wills. So what does it mean to present our bodies as a living sacrifice? Basically, it is to daily choose to set aside our personal desires and to live our lives each day in such a way that honors and glorifies God. As the verse further specifies, we should live in such a way that is holy and acceptable unto God. Holiness refers to the absence of sin. That doesn't mean that we don't ever sin, but that we are striving to not sin and to make things right when we do. Verse 2 then goes on to tell us not to be conformed to this world. Conformed carries the idea of fitting into the world's agenda or mold. Rather, we should look and act different than the world. Paul continues by saying that we need to be transformed by the renewing of our minds. The renewing process is us seeking to be in God's Word, studying it, and memorizing it. As we spend time with God through His Word, then we will be transformed and sanctified. As Paul continues this verse, he says that the reason for all of this is so that we may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. We need to be transformed so that we can live lives that are acceptable to God. We need to be in tune with God's Word so we can know what His will is for our lives. As we wrap up for today, Jim Elliot was passionate for the cause of Christ to the point of death. He didn't know that death was coming that day, but he was devoted to Christ and his work. He had given his life to the Lord, and the Lord was using him. Can the same be said of you? Have you given your life to the Lord for the Lord to use? Or are you living each day for yourself? I challenge you to, each day, give your life to the Lord as a living sacrifice.
Thanks for being a part of Walk Talks today by listening and subscribing to our podcast. Follow us on social media for sneak peeks at future episodes and to share your favorites with others who would benefit as well. We hope your heart has been enriched by God's Word to take your next step in following Christ.